Okay, so this is going to be my ultimate video, pretty much covering everything. You can pause the video here if you want. I'm going over all these different things here. I'm going to put timestamps for everything, and let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to be going over is Gsync causes input lag, blah, blah, Vsync, blah, blah. Make sure monitor says Gsync. So I made a little chart up top here, and it says, so if you're running no Gsync, if you do not have a Gsync monitor, then you need to cap your, you should, I shouldn't say you need to. You should cap your FPS in achievable FPS if over your monitor's refresh rate. So the same thing applies to 144 and 240. So if you're under your monitor's refresh rate, so if I have a 60 hertz monitor and the max frames I'm getting is like 40, then you would just stay uncapped. Same thing goes for 144 and 240. Let's say I'm getting an average of like 200 FPS on a 240 hertz monitor, then just leave it uncapped. But if you are getting an FPS over your monitor's refresh rate, I highly recommend capping your FPS at an achievable rate. So let's say you want to figure out what your low point is for your FPS. Let's say I have a 144 hertz monitor and I am going to be playing, and I'm sorry, and my lowest point is like 200 FPS in game. Let's say I get in game, I have like 300 FPS, and then my low points when I'm like fighting or like just running around the map is like 200 FPS. I want to cap my FPS in game using the FPS limiter at 200 FPS. And the reason why I'm going to do this is because random fluctuations in FPS lead to just awful input lag, and just your input lag is going to be everywhere. If I have 400 FPS at one point and I have 200 FPS at another point, then my input lag is going to differ and it's going to lead to inconsistent aiming. If you cap your FPS at just a straight achievable rate, you'll see that your aiming just becomes more consistent and everything just feels more consistent and smooth. So again, let's say I'm running a 240 hertz monitor that doesn't have G-Sync, and my FPS is like 350, 400. In game, it drops down to like 300 at its lowest. I'm going to cap at 300 or 280. Whatever my highest, whatever my lowest point is, I'm going to cap at that FPS. Again, you don't have to listen to me, but this is personally what I think and what I've experienced just testing a bunch of different things. I have 240 hertz monitors, 144 hertz monitors. I have tons of monitors laying around. I've tested all of them, and I've tested them on Intel systems and AMD systems. And this is personally what I think is the best experience. Again, you don't have to listen to me. I highly recommend you just try it. Just try it and see if it's a better experience for you. If not, go back to your settings. You don't have to listen to me. The next thing is Gsync. So 60 hertz monitors, there's no such thing as Gsync. I don't think, at least. For 144 and 240 hertz, if your average FPS is under 144 FPS, use Gsync plus Vsync in the NVIDIA control panel, enable Reflex in game, and then make sure you turn off Vsync in game. So this is only if you're getting under 144 FPS. No matter what, if you have a Gsync monitor, you're getting under 144 FPS on average, use Gsync. If your average FPS is over 144 FPS, then don't use Gsync. Just put your monitor on fixed refresh and cap your FPS at an achievable rate, just like I talked about with the no Gsync. The reason for this is the input lag trade-off at 144 hertz when using Gsync, in my opinion, is not worth it. But again, if you're not if you're not into comp Valorant, which I'm guessing you probably are if you're watching this video, then if you're not trying to achieve like low input lag and you're just like a casual gamer, let's say, you can try Gsync at 144 hertz. Like, it's a great experience, honestly. And like, again, the input lag, it isn't crazy, but it's not worth it, again, in my opinion, but you can try it. And to try it, again, you run Gsync plus Vsync in your NVIDIA control panel, enable Reflex in game, and turn Vsync off in game. Next, 240 hertz. If you're running a 240 hertz monitor that has Gsync, it's literally the same thing. I just copied this right over. Try the exact same thing, and then you could also you can also try Gsync plus Vsync plus Reflex to see how it feels, because the input lag isn't that much. We're talking between 2 to 4 milliseconds. Like I'd say like 2 milliseconds on average. But again, you can try both and see how it is. And if I was running, if I had a 240 hertz monitor, I'd be buying the Diac. Who makes it? The BenQ Diac monitor. That's probably like the best monitor there is for 240 hertz right now. But a lot of people, because of price wise, they're running the Asus TUF monitor, which can be overclocked to 280 hertz. If you can overclock your monitor to 280 hertz, I'd try the Gsync plus Vsync plus Reflex, because the input lag there is very, very, very minimal. On 360 hertz, you should be running Gsync plus Vsync plus Reflex. It's pretty simple. It's the best setting in my opinion. Again, you can try any of these settings. You should try all these settings and see how they feel. On 360 hertz, I know a lot of people, they run fixed refresh because, oh, Gsync adds input lag, blah, blah, blah. No, again, running uncapped frames is terrible in Valorant, in my opinion. Gsync plus Vsync plus Reflex on a 360 hertz monitor with Gsync esports mode, it's the best the game ever feels. Like the game just feels unreal on this setting. So I highly recommend using this setting, just like for the same exact settings as these on 360 hertz. If you don't have Reflex, meaning you have an AMD card or some other graphics card, I have no idea, then 60 hertz, I shouldn't say no such thing. Oh yeah, no, with Gsync there's no such thing, sorry. So for, if you're running an AMD card, let's say, you want to cap your FPS using the in-game limiter 3 below the refresh rate for 144 hertz, 3 below the refresh rate for 240 hertz, and 5 below the refresh rate for 360 hertz. This is only if you do not own an NVIDIA card, because Reflex is specific to NVIDIA. So that means you won't have Reflex, meaning you need to use an FPS limiter. So this is what you do for capping wise. That's going to cover Gsync. Oh, the last thing, sorry. Make sure your monitor says Gsync. So here's just like a shitty video recorded on my iPhone. Make sure that when you go onto your monitor settings, for mine here, if I go to others, it's really hard to see, but under display info, it says mode and it says Gsync. I want to make sure that if I am running Gsync, that this mode says Gsync, because sometimes if you enable the settings, it might not work. What you should do is just factory reset your monitor, restart your PC, and your mode should appear as Gsync. It might not be in these settings. This is just for this monitor, but on other monitors, it might just say Gsync mode at the top, somewhere around here. Somewhere in your monitor settings, it should say like what mode is actually enabled. It won't be under game preset modes. That's actually like presets. It's going to be under the info somewhere. So make sure that you have Gsync enabled on the monitor as well. Make sure it's detecting the Gsync through your NVIDIA control panel. That's covering the first part of this video. All right, so the next part is going to be, I just bold that. The next part's going to be Valorant in-game settings and NVIDIA settings. So if your Valorant in-game settings, I honestly recommend if you're trying to push FPS, you can just put everything on low, turn everything off in the video settings, and you can mess with different settings. Everything's going to slightly add the tiniest bit of render or input lag, and the best settings I can recommend is just going to turn everything off, leaving everything on the lowest. That's going to push the most FPS. And let's say you are using Gsync and you're capping, you can turn some settings on medium and some settings on high. But what I do is I turn on your like game to render latency stats and just turn things up like to medium or to high and just see what it does to your actual like game to render latency stats. Turn them on and then just turn stuff up, medium or high, or turn like different settings that are there, just turn them on and see what happens. If they fluctuate, if they start getting higher, then turn them off. It's pretty simple. Everyone should be able to test this way. Just go through and turn on your reflex settings And if you don't have Reflex, then see if it causes FPS drops. Just look at your FPS, your average FPS, turn stuff on, see if it drops your FPS. But the best thing for like actual testing for settings, if you have an NVIDIA card, is to enable your latency stats, your game to render latency, your render latency, and your, I forget what the other stat is, and just go through and turn on different things to see if they actually cause like render lag. Like see if it causes like increases in render, like your render numbers, I guess you could say. I personally, again, just play everything low. I like the way the game looks. It's fine for me. And for NVIDIA settings, I'm going to go to my NVIDIA control panel here. Adjust image settings with preview. Make sure it's on use the advanced 3D image settings. Manage 3D settings. You can go to program settings and select for whatever game you're using. I just have global settings because this is just copies over my global settings. I just have it so it uses them all. So I'm running everything off except for anisotropic filtering because Valorant forces you to use anisotropic filtering. It's set to 1x on the lowest, so you might as well leave it on application controlled. Everything off. CUDA GPUs is on all. I'm using Gsync. I selected my GPU here. Power management, high performance. I said perform maximum performance. Highest available for preferred refresh rate. Shader cache on. Anisotropic sample option is on. Allow high performance. You can just copy these settings. These are the settings I run. You don't have to copy them. You can do whatever you want. But I have Vsync on obviously because I'm running Gsync plus Vsync, and then I'm running Reflex on in game. Physics, I just leave this the way it is. Change resolution, I'm on native, and make sure you're under PC. If you have like other settings here, make sure you scroll down to PC, select native, or if you're using stretched, I'll talk about that after. Put your monitor to the highest refresh rate. Make sure you're using a DisplayPort cable. If not, go buy one. Adjust desktop color settings. This is personal preference. I use 70% digital vibrance. None of these settings matter. Adjust desktop size and position. I have it on no scaling because I'm running native, and perform scaling on display, and I do not have this checked. Make sure Gsync's enabled if you're using Gsync, and that's it for NVIDIA control panel. If you're playing stretched, so I think I mentioned that here. So fix refresh if playing stretched. So if you're not using native resolution, Gsync isn't going to work properly. If you can try it yourself, like maybe it will work on some other monitors. For the 360 Hz monitor, if I go to 1440, let's say, or if I put in a custom resolution, I should say. So if I customize, enable, and I put in 1440, and I test it, and then obviously if you're running a stretch resolution, you need to put this on full screen and override this. You might not have a display option. That's another thing. Some people just have the GPU. Don't worry, just because your monitor doesn't have scaling, just leave it on GPU. But if you have a display option, leave it on display. Hit apply. And if you go to your monitor settings where I mentioned before where that Gsync is, I mentioned that in the last thing, just find on your monitor where the mode is and see if Gsync's there. If Gsync's enabled, you'll actually see that Gsync isn't enabled anymore on your monitor because what it does is running a custom resolution will actually turn off Gsync on your monitor. So you might as well just go to the Manage 3D settings and change this to fixed refresh and turn Vsync off if you're playing in stretched. Again, also, sorry, another thing to mention, if you are messing with your Vsync and Gsync settings, your preferred refresh rate will randomly change to application controlled when messing around. Make sure you change it to highest available. That's a big thing. This will randomly change. Make sure you always set it to highest available. Yeah, so going back, stretched, make sure it's on fixed refresh if you're playing in stretched. And that pretty much covers NVIDIA control panel and in-game Valorant settings. All right, the next thing is why should I cap my FPS? Counter-Strike versus Valorant engines. So, why should you cap your FPS? I think I went over this actually in the first, or like the first part of the video. Capping your FPS leads to like the same input lag, and it leads to not as many stutters, and it just leads to a better experience in Valorant. The reason why people have this mentality of capping their FPS is because they come from Counter-Strike. Problem with that is that Counter-Strike and Valorant are built on two different game engines. Counter-Strike is built off of Valve's engine, and Valorant is built off of Unreal Engine 4. They're two different engines, and yes, they might, like, Counter-Strike and Valorant have similar gameplay, but because the engines are different, we can't just grab our CSGO settings and just bring them over to Valorant. It doesn't work like that. They're based on two different engines, and too many people are try to compare them in the sense of settings wise, which they're just not the same. So with using Unreal Engine 4, you should 100%, in my opinion again, cap your FPS at an achievable rate. It will make the game just feel so much better. I talked about this in the first part. It just leads to better, just more consistent aiming, and it just leads to a better experience in the game. Again, people who tell you different, a lot of people just have no idea what they're talking about because they just compare the two games because they're both CPU bound. Just because they're CPU bound games doesn't mean they run off the same engine, meaning you can't use the same settings. I can't stress that enough. You can compare the game's gameplay, but you can't compare the engines because they are not the same. That's all I have to say for this part here. And go ahead and try capping your FPS in achievable rate, or if you just listen to this part, just go back to the first part and listen to what I had to say about it. That's pretty much it for this part. All right, part 4 is going over the NVIDIA guide to optimization, which is here. So NVIDIA has an article, I'll link it, and it's how to reduce lag, a guide to better system latency. So in this article, they talk about a ton of different things, including Reflex and just like what is system latency. It's a great article to read through, but I'm just going to go over and touch on a lot of the points that they have here. So they pretty much just say like how to optimize your peripheral latency. That's first. So increase your polling rate. This is 100% true. They show the graphs here that running your mouse on 1000 hertz is going to lead to less latency than running 500, 250, 125, and also there's the Razer 8K mice, obviously. But running at a higher polling rate will lead to less system latency, which is true. Next, invest in a lower latency mouse and keyboard. Yeah, obviously that's going to lead to less latency. That's just simple. Next, they're talking about Reflex. We highly recommend you turn on Reflex. Yeah, of course, blah, blah, blah. Turn on ultra low latency mode. So touching on these points here, ultra low latency mode. You do not need to turn this on for Valorant. You turn this off because Reflex overrides this setting. So you do not need to turn on low latency mode. Reflex overrides it. Pretty simple. And yeah, just turn this off. You don't need it on when you're running Reflex. If on different games that don't support Reflex, yeah, you can turn this on. I don't recommend turning it on for CSGO, but yeah. Next, this is just covering, what does this cover? Oh, just how Reflex is better pretty much for system latency. Turn on exclusive full screen. This is just saying make sure your game's in full screen. And yeah, that's another thing. Make sure you're in Valorant in settings. Make sure you're not running full screen windowed or bordered or windowed mode. Make sure you're on full screen mode. This is not referring to disabling full screen optimizations. I'll touch on that later. But yeah, this does not mean disable full screen optimizations. Turn off Vsync. This is true again. Turn off Vsync if you don't want to get increased input lag. However, if you have a variable refresh rate like a Gsync monitor, you can get the best of both worlds. No tearing if your FPS is below your refresh rate and no Vsync latency. For Gsync gamers who don't want to tear, keeping Vsync on while using Reflex or the ultra low latency mode will automatically cap the frame rate below the refresh rate, preventing Vsync back pressure, eliminate tearing, and keeping latency low if you become GPU bound below the refresh rate of your display. Just like I say, and a lot of people just ask these questions. They're just like, why am I enabling Vsync? Vsync is bad. Well, you're not actually entering the Vsync range. Vsync kicks in when you're above your monitor's refresh rate. I touched on this on my other article about Gsync and like why to use Gsync. You're not going to be enter Vsync range because you're never going to be above your monitor's refresh rate. You're always going to be within Gsync range, because what Reflex does is it's technically an in-game limiter, and well, it's technically just an FPS limiter. And what it does is it caps your FPS below your refresh rate, so you're always within Gsync range, and you're never touching Vsync range. So yes, this is the best setting, especially at 360 hertz. It says it right here, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, where do you get this information?" It's literally in NVIDIA's articles. Like, you just gotta look for them. And this is why I recommend these settings. I didn't make these settings up, obviously. It's straight from NVIDIA themselves. Turn on game mode in Windows. Yeah, that's obvious. Turn on game mode. Maybe like on older builds of Windows, it might have not been that good, but on newer builds of Windows, yes, turn on game mode. Overclocking, we'll get into that later. Consider faster hardware. Yeah, obviously, if you buy better hardware, it's going to lead to lower latency. Simple. Reduce settings. I said this before as well. If you reduce your settings, like bring down to low, it's going to increase your FPS and lead to lower latency. Then they talk about advanced PC latency optimization. So enable your maximum refresh rate. I touched on that. Turn on Gsync mode, esports mode if you have it. This is only for 360 hertz monitors. Turn on some overdrive. I'm going to talk about that in my next part, which is talking about RTINGS. And then wrapping up. I think they also had where was it? They had something. Oh, here. I totally skipped over this. Here. There are other small tweaks that can be done, such as MSI mode. GPU, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so MSI mode, you can download something called MSI mode. Just let me open it. Nope, because I did not run it as administrator. You can get something called MSI mode, run as administrator. And it will look like this. So you might have a bunch of things here, but it's literally saying that to put your thing, like it's saying that this could reduce latency, which it does help putting your hardware in MSI mode. I can tell you that right now. So you want to check these boxes that say MSI mode only if supported modes actually say MSI. If they do not say MSI, do not check the box off. That's pretty simple. That's straightforward. For these, I actually recommend leaving everything on undefined, unless just by standard, whatever, when you install this, just leave it the way it is. Do not touch these priorities. People say to put your stuff on high, stuff like that. Just leave it undefined and don't touch this. This can lead to problems, and I've tested different things. Leave it the way it is. If it's left on high, if it's already on high by default, leave it. If it's undefined, just leave it. Just enable MSI mode for things that are actually available for MSI mode. Next, GPU cache write combining. This is for older, useless. Process scheduling, quantum modes. This is talking about something called Win32 priority separation. So in your registry editor, oh yeah, I was just debunking how this mouse data queue size crap was actually, doesn't really do anything. I was just doing testing for this. This is like an AtomX melody tweak. It doesn't actually do anything. I was just doing some testing with this. Same with the keyboard one. It actually doesn't do anything. So under HKey local machine, system, current control set, services, under oh no, it's under priority. Priority control. So there's something called Win32 priority separation. You can actually put this value to 26. You can look more into this. People say to put it on 28. Like, there's different values you can use. That's exactly what this is. Process scheduling quantum modes. I recommend putting on 26, which is technically just like Windows default, which is 2. It's like the exact same thing. And what it is under it's under like display, the way the PC looks. Changing the way the PC looks. I just can't even remember what it actually is. I'm drawing a huge blank right now. But it's the way that Windows actually handles processes, and 26 is the best value, or 2. Whatever the Windows default is fine as well. I recommend putting in 26. You can look up different things. I'm not going to go in depth about that, but you can look up what it is. Interrupt CPU affinities, and affinities don't do anything. Don't mess with your affinities. Let Windows do all that kind of let Windows take care of your CPU affinities. Processor idle states. This is talking, I'm pretty sure this is talking about C states, stuff like that, just putting your cores to sleep. Maybe it's not, but I'm pretty sure that's what they mean by here. And I highly recommend turning off C states. I'm going to touch on that in my BIOS video. But yeah, IRQ sharing, that's another thing. Device manager. View. Is it resources by type? Yes, this is what I'm looking for. Here he is. Interrupt request. So these are the IRQs that are assigned to your compute, like assigned to everything that's in your computer pretty much. You do not want IRQ sharing, which means that you don't want any of these values to be on the same, to be running over the same value. So if I have, so these two here don't matter because they're the timers. These can run over each other because they're technically the same thing. But if you have two different things that are on the same IRQ, like if this said 7 and this said 7, or this said 55, this said 55, for example, you do not want that, you don't want IRQ sharing. You don't want them to share the same IRQ. So if something does share the same IRQ, what you should do is go to, in your device manager, view devices by type, and choose, if let's say two things run over each other, disable one of them. Right click, disable device. That's pretty much how to stop IRQ sharing, is to go ahead and disable that device, whatever device is sharing. Usually they're tied to each other in some way, and you only need one and not the other. You should disable whatever one you do not need. That pretty much goes through this article. That covers everything. Invest in higher refresh rate, turn on overdrive. I'm going to talk about in the next part. But yeah, that's everything going over the NVIDIA system latency article. I'll link this again, but yeah. I'll see you guys in the next, well, not see you guys. I'm going on to the next thing. All right, so the next part of the video is referred to RTINGS. So RTINGS is a website that goes over, they review monitors, and this is pretty much directly correlated to overdrive. So your monitor has an overdrive setting on it. Most monitors do, and it might be called something response time. It might say overdrive. It really depends on your monitor. And for my monitor specifically, which is this Dell Alienware AW2521H, I have something called response time, and the options are fast, super fast, and extreme. So when I'm going to set that overdrive setting, what I do usually for any monitor that I buy is I go to this website and I find the monitor and I scroll down to here where it says motion. And it shows the response time at max refresh rate. And it says right here, the best overdrive setting is fast. And then they give the charts on why it's the best. So if you look here, it shows response time tables and charts. Let's say people choose extreme. They're like, oh, I want extreme overdrive. We look at the table, it actually causes a ridiculous amount of overshoot error, which is just going to lead to terrible aiming. And having too high of an overdrive setting will lead to ghosting, inverse ghosting, and you'll just miss your shots, and it's just an awful experience. So making sure that you're using a good overdrive setting is very important on monitors. You don't want to just set it to the highest and forget about it. You want to actually find the best overdrive setting. So this is the chart for the fast setting. As you can see, there's actually 0 overshoot in this chart here, which is perfect. And this is what we want. There might be a lower response time for extreme. Like here, let's say the response time is a lot lower, but the overshoot error is not worth it. It's not worth it to have a higher response rate monitor that has a ridiculous amount of overshoot. It just is what it is. It's pretty simple. You can go to this website and you can read all about different monitors and recommended settings and stuff. But when it comes to overdrive, go to RTINGS and search up your monitor and look for the response time at the max refresh rate and see what the best overdrive setting is and apply that. Simple as that. Not going to go over anything else for overdrive, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, the next part is BIOS settings. Updating BIOS is the first thing on the list. So if you go to your motherboard's website, I have a ROG Crosshair 8 Dark Hero. And I go to support, driver tools, and driver and tools. I'm going to select my OS and I see BIOS here. I download it, put it on a memory stick, and I flash my BIOS in through the BIOS itself. You're going to flash it. I'm not going to show how to do that. You can just look up a video on how to flash your BIOS. I highly recommend updating your BIOS. There's lots of fixes, and if you're on like a BIOS from like 2016, let's say you have an older PC, you should update your BIOS to the latest one. There's lots of fixes and different things. For example, AMD had a problem with the new gen CPUs. They had some USB issues. This update fixed it. So this is a big update for AMD users. So yeah, update your BIOS. There's lots of fixes and different things that can actually like help with your PC. The next thing on here is show BIOS settings. I'm going to show my BIOS settings at the end of this video. I'm going to show BIOS settings for my AMD PC, which is the 5950X, and then my Intel PC, which is, I think it's a 9700K, an i7 9700K, I'm pretty sure. And I'm going to be showing the how to enable XMP mode and how to overclock the CPU, pretty much. Yeah, so moving on, disable SMT for high CPU, for high core count PCs. So if you have a high core count PC, so I'm just going to go to here. If I go to Task Manager and go to Performance, and under CPU here, it says Core 16, Logical Processor 16. This is because I have hyperthreading disabled. If I had hyperthreading enabled in BIOS, or just some CPUs don't even have hyperthreading, if I did have it, this would show 32. If I have an 8-core PC, like an 8-core PC, this is going to show 16 here. If this number here, if the logical processors is double the number of cores, then you have hyperthreading on. You do not want to disable SMT if you have a 4-core count PC, like CPU, or lower. If you have an 8-core count PC and higher, I recommend disabling SMT or hyperthreading. You don't have to do it in BIOS. You can use Process Lasso. I have this so it's always on top, so I'm just going to close this. What you can do is you can find the game in Lasso once it's open, right-click, CPU Affinity always, and you can disable SMT. What we'll do is uncheck all the threads. You can do it that way as well, just specifically for the game. The reason why I recommend disabling SMT, and a lot of other people will tell you to do it, is a lot of games, especially Valorant's meant to run on a toaster. It doesn't need high core counts. It needs fast cores. So Riot actually said that a higher core count PC that's running on lower overclock compared to a low core count PC running a higher overclock, it will run better on the low core count PC because Valorant doesn't need all those cores. And when you have multi-core threaded rendering enabled, if you have a ton of cores, and especially threaded cores, it has to choose from, Valorant can get confused and Valorant just doesn't know what it's doing pretty much. It's terribly optimized, and I have a tweet, not a tweet, I have a DM from one of the devs and just saying that they recommend disabling SMT for high core count PCs. I can show, if anyone wants that tweet, I can just follow me on Twitter and I can send it to you. Although you can just take a screenshot of it, but you should disable SMT for high core count PCs when playing Valorant. And it's because Valorant doesn't need that many cores, and having too many cores can confuse the game and it can just cause latency issues. Next thing I'm going to talk about is tightening RAM. This is if you run you can just put your RAM in XMP mode and call it a day, that's fine. But if you really want to go in depth, you can actually manually input your RAM timings. And this will cause it will cause less FPS. It will cause you to keep within a more consistent FPS range. And it's just a good thing to do, but it is very, very tedious. I'm going to say that right now. If you don't want to spend the time, if it takes a lot of time in testing. Honestly, for me to find my perfect RAM timings, it took weeks because it's just literally if you put in a RAM timing, it doesn't work, you have to flash your BIOS and do it again and do it again. And you need to keep lowering your RAM timings or tightening them up until you find perfect settings. And it is brutal to do. You can use, there's programs that can get you started. You can also try and copy other people's settings online. If you look up your RAM and look up your motherboard on Reddit, you can find someone that has RAM timings probably already for the exact model motherboard, CPU, and RAM that you have, or something like your RAM, and you can copy their timings. But honestly, like, it is very tedious to do, but very worth it in the end. And yeah, if you're not into computers and you don't really care, don't just forget about it. Just put your RAM in XMP mode. But if you really care that much, tightening your RAM timings can help. And the last thing would be make sure your RAM's in the right slots. That's another big thing. A lot of people put their RAM in the wrong slots. And if you go to your motherboard's manual, you can actually see what slots your RAM should be in. So if you have one slot of, like if you have one stick of RAM, it will tell you exactly which slot to put it in. Two slots of two sticks of RAM. And even on your motherboard, this actually is like right on my motherboard. The starred ones are where you want to put your 2 sticks of RAM, which probably most of you have 2 sticks of RAM, in the second and fourth slots. This is specifically for my motherboard. Most motherboards are like this, but it's worth a shot. It's worth it to just go find your motherboard, go to the manual, and find out what slots your RAM belong in. Yeah, and now I'm going to show BIOS settings for overclock right now. So again, it's recorded on my phone, so sorry about that. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to see a screen like this. You're going to want to hit F7 to go to advanced mode. Then you're going to hit load optimize defaults, or exit, and you're going to hit OK. You go to main. Sorry, not main. You're going to go to AI tweaker. You're going to scroll down to load 5G profile. That's OK. And then you're going to have to go up to AI overclock tuner and choose XMP1 or XMP2. Let's start with XMP1. No, and then go down ASUS multi-core enhancement and put disabled. From there, for your CPU core ratio, you can change this to whatever you want. If you want to go to 4.7 gigahertz, if you want to go to like 5 gigahertz, leave it at 50, which is 5 gigahertz. Then go to onboard devices, and you can disable whatever onboard devices you don't use here, Bluetooth or HD audio, whatever you want. Press F9 and go to search and search for C states. Search C state and it doesn't come up. Try C dash state and disable C states. So go and disable it. Then go to monitor and scroll all the way down to QFan configuration. And go to your, like the first thing here is going to be for water cooler, let's say. Put it in DC mode if you have a 3-pin. Then you want to change it to 100 and to 100 for percentages. If you have a 4-pin, choose PM mode. You're going to search for, if you have any Intel, like search Intel, search cool. If there's anything Intel cool or quiet, anything like to do with like cool and quiet, or if you're looking for that. If there's nothing there, leave it. But if you see like an Intel cool and quiet, then disable that. Then go and disable ASUS Armory Crate. Then I also recommend saving a user profile before exiting, which I didn't do, but okay, so this is for Ryzen CPUs. Just mashing my F2 button to get into my BIOS. It's probably going to look like this when you get into your BIOS. What you want to do is press F7, go to exit, and load optimize defaults. Go to Extreme Tweaker, AI Overclock Tuner, choose DOCP Standard or XMP. Then you're going to want to choose your FCLK frequency. You want it to be half of what your memory frequency is. Then go to Precision Boost Overdrive and enable it. Then you're going to go to Advanced Onboard Devices, and you're going to disable whatever onboard devices you don't use. So whatever you don't use in here, just disable it. Disabling Wi-Fi, Bluetooth controller. I disabled Intel LAN because I don't need it. You're going to go to monitor, scroll there down to Q fan configuration. Choose your type of fan. I use DC mode because I'm on 3-pin. Manual here, and then change this to 100 for bottom, and it will change the middle value as well. So you're always running at 100 for your water cooler. You're going to go to Tool, Asus Armory Crate, and disable it. And then you're going to hit search, F9 search. You're going to search for C state. Or sorry, search for spectrum here first. Search for spectrum and disable both the spectrum options if you have spectrum. Then you're going to search for C states. C state without a dash first. Disable it if it appears. Then type in C states with a dash. And disable it as well. Then search for CC6. Disable this. These are all just sleep functions in the BIOS. And if you go to Advanced, under the Advanced tab again, if you go to CPU configuration, I have something called PSS support. That's like the AMD Cool and Quiet, which is renamed to that now. Disabled it. And then I'm just going to save this as a profile. So I'm just going to call it whatever I want and save to profile. Whatever number profile I want, save it, and then put out. And that's it. All right, so the next part is OBS settings. So sometimes people, when they do their OBS settings here, first of all, when you use OBS, make sure you right-click Properties, Compatibility, and Run Program as Administrator. Change all settings for users, Run Program as Administrator. And when you use a display capture or a game capture, sorry, I might have cut out there. If you use a game capture, sometimes it actually won't capture your game, and the reason why that is because you don't have Streamlabs or OBS in administrator mode. That's it. There's no like, oh man, like it's my computer or anything. It's the number one cause for it not actually grabbing the game capture is because you need to run the program in administrator. I don't know why that is, but that's what it is. What it is. The next thing would be for OBS. I'm using Streamlabs OBS right now. I want to, if I'm recording, streaming using Streamlabs OBS, using replay buffer, I'm going to talk about that after. Right click to the right here and click performance mode. This is going to put OBS in performance mode. And if you're playing your game and you're actually just running OBS the way it is with like preview enabled and there's certain things that are going on in the background, it will cause FPS drops. It's going to cause your game to stutter, all different things. Put this in performance mode. It's going to make your game run a lot better. And same thing for OBS. Let's say I'm running OBS Studio. Oh, OBS is already running. Shit. Oh, I have it open here. Just disable preview if you're just using Studio, but I recommend using Streamlabs OBS. Right-click performance mode. Call it a day. When using replay buffer, I have replay buffer on here, yeah. So I don't recommend using NVIDIA's overlays or NVIDIA's, what do they have, shadow play. I'm going to go in depth about that later as well. I recommend using replay buffer, which is built into OBS. If you go to settings, it picks it up perfect. Go to settings and under output, replay buffer. It should be right here. Click enable replay buffer. This is the amount of time you actually want to record, like to get clips for. So let's say it's this replay buffer works the exact same as shadow play. It just uses your RAM instead. And most of you, if you're running 16 gigs of RAM, it's not gonna, like, your game's not using all 16 gigs of RAM. This just takes a slight bit of your RAM and lets it use replay buffer pretty much. That's how it grabs the clips. So enable replay buffer, put the time allocated that you want. Go to hotkeys. You can here save replay right here. I have mine set to page down. You use whatever key you want. And then you just want to put your resolutions or what resolution you want. And trying to see here, I think that's it. And then for output, it depends on what you want to use. Recording, I have mine using NVIDIA new, which is my GPU. CQP on 15. Yeah, so these are the settings I have for my replay buffer. And then that's on 720 because I actually forgot to change this to 1920 by 1080. So all these videos are going to be in 720, which is fine. But this is the settings I have. And then when you start your game, you want to make sure that first of all it's capturing your game. After it captures your game, right click, put it in performance mode, and turn on replay buffer, which is right down here. You just click start replay buffer, and then anytime you want to grab a clip, you just press your save replay button, and it's going to save to your videos or to whatever output path you have. That's how you enable replay buffer. Highly recommend using replay buffer. And that pretty much covers my whole OBS section. All right, next part is stress testing. I'm in 1920 by 1080 now. Sorry, all of these are in, these are all going to be in, what is it, 1280, whatever I had the setting on before. But now we're going to be in 1080. So here we go, stress testing. When you apply an overclock, when I went over the overclocks in this, you should stress test the overclock. Don't go and after I think I showed in this video to enable 5 gigahertz for Intel or to enable PBO. PBO shouldn't be a problem, but for like enabling 5 gigahertz, you might not be able to handle that, especially if you don't have if you have a stock cooler, you probably shouldn't run 5 gigahertz. You should run something like 4.6, 4.7 maybe. But yeah, stress testing is a big thing to do. So what you do is you need to download a program called Intel Burn Test, extract it and open it up. It will look like this by default, I believe. And then you need to download a program called HW Info, and you want to enable the sensor status. You want to look at the sensors pretty much for your computer, and you want to scroll down on the sensors to be able to see the temps of the CPU. You want to be able to see what temperatures you're running. And what you're going to do is after you apply the overclock, you're going to do stress testing. So you're going to change the stress level to high or very high. I'm going to go to high. Here, let's do high. And you're going to run it 10 times and you're going to hit start. And hit start here. I'll run a stress test. Why not? And it's going to show you, you're going to hear your fans start running, and it's going to show you the temps of your computer, what your temps are hitting. So right now my computer is hitting 75.8 degrees. You do not want this to go over 90, 95 degrees. 90 is like pushing it. 95, if it goes over 95, hit stop right away and go lower your overclock. That's pretty simple. If your CPU is over if you scroll down, you also see thermal throttling. This goes to yes. If this changes to yes, that's not good. You do not have a good overclock. That means your overclock's throttling. So lower your overclock. But yeah, I'm gonna stop this. Let this run 10 times. It will say pass if it passes. If it pops up and says fail, unstable overclock, you need to lower your overclock. Okay? This is the best way for stress testing a CPU when you are running, like trying to overclock your computer. Put stress on your CPU to make sure, and you monitor the temps yourself. That's going over stress testing, and then TM5. You should also get a program you can download it called TM5 Memory Test. I'm going to open here. And what this will do is it's going to test your RAM pretty much for errors. So it's going to take up, if you go to Task Manager, you'll see that it's going to take up almost all of your RAM in use and use 100% of your CPU. And it's going to stress test your RAM pretty much. So if this passes, if there's an error, so this is after running your, if you're trying to do RAM testings for timings, if you put your RAM in XMP mode is sometimes not stable. You should run a mem test for sure. 100% run a mem test here. And run that for 2 hours, and I know that's a long time. What I did was I do a RAM test before I go to bed, and then that's why it took so long. Like it took weeks for me to get my timings right. I just run a RAM test, go to bed or go to work, and then wake up and go and see if it passed, or after 2 hours, just stop it. And yeah, that's how you stress test your RAM. Again, like, sorry, I think I was saying this before, XMP mode might not always be stable on your computer. If you put XMP mode on, run TM5 and make sure that XMP mode is stable. That's a big thing to do. Stress testing is very important to make sure your system's stable. Do not run an unstable system. Don't go and apply an overclock, and don't go and apply a ridiculous overclock without stress testing. You need to stress test to make sure your system is stable. That pretty much covers this part. All right, the next thing I'm going to cover is pure sine wave UPS if you have bad power, expensive equipment. So if you have very expensive equipment or you have bad power, let's say you like random screen flashes, or you think you have like mouse pulling issues and stuff, it might actually have to do with the power that's being delivered to your computer. If you have expensive equipment, I highly recommend getting a UPS, and especially a pure sine wave output UPS. Yeah, a pure sine wave UPS. So this is one that CyberPower actually makes. And what it is, it's a pure sine wave UPS, which means that it sends one constant voltage to your computer. So these are very good for gaming systems. So when I plug my computer into the wall, it can randomly send your your outlets can send random voltages to your computer. They can fluctuate, they can be lower or higher, and they can fluctuate. What a pure sine wave UPS does is it sends one pure voltage to your computer. So if I have 120 volt like setting on this UPS, it's going to send it's going to send 120 volts to my computer no matter what. It's not going to go lower, it's not going to go higher. It's going to send one pure voltage to my computer and whatever other devices I have plugged in. This is going to eliminate, let's say you have bad power, you have a lot of power outages, or you have like screen flickering, mouse pulling issues, all that kind of stuff. This is going to help with that. This is going to eliminate those problems most likely. Again, it might be a different problem, but most likely it's a power issue. And if you have expensive equipment, I highly recommend make sure it's a pure sine wave output UPS. And you can see if it's a pure sine wave output. Let's see, pure. It lives up to the pure sine claims, and I no longer have speaker buzz or screen flashes. I'm pretty sure it says somewhere around here. Oh, here, yeah. Automatic voltage regulation. Corrects minor power fluctuations without switching to battery power, therefore extending the life. It also has 3-year warranty, including $500,000 connected equipment guarantee. That's a great thing about these UPSs as well. But it should say somewhere in here about pure sine wave. I don't know where it is. But yeah, you want to make sure that you are getting a pure sine wave UPS. Sine wave UPS. Using sine wave output, this means pure sine wave. Yeah. Pretty much it. I have one right underneath me. I actually have two of these. I have one plugged in for my router as well. And I also have like some other stuff connected to it. But yeah, highly recommend getting a UPS for expensive equipment or power issues. All right, the next part is Windows optimizations pretty much. So following Freethy's A to Z guide. So if you go to this YouTuber here, Freethy, and you go to videos and you look for there's these 3 videos here. They're called A to Z optimization guide. So this one here is the prep, and then you can choose if you want to use server or Windows 10. Server is very good if you want a very debloated Windows. If you want a massively debloated Windows with like nothing in it pretty much, use server. If you want like Windows features and stuff and you just like the general Windows feel, you should use this. You should just follow the 20H2 V2 Windows optimization guide. If you hit like Windows R key and type in WinVer, you can see what version of Windows you're on. If you're not on 20H2, which is the latest build of Windows, I highly recommend following this video and updating your Windows. If you're on an older build of Windows, you should update your Windows. You should 100% get on the latest version of Windows and follow this guide. Yeah, he literally goes over everything. He step by step pretty much literally goes over everything. And you get this to-do folder, which is going to go through how to like overclock your GPU. I don't think he really goes in depth on how to overclock your GPU, but he gives you all the programs that you need, which also includes like ISLC, MSI mode, everything. And it's all step by step. And you can also, he has a registry file that gets applied. You can, if you right click on any registry file and hit edit, it will show you all the tweaks that are actually being like applied. And you can literally just copy them and paste them in Google to see what they do if you don't actually know what they do, which I highly recommend. If people don't go in depth and explain what registry tweaks do, you should 100% not apply them without actually, like you could download them, click edit, and actually go and find out what they do. I touched on that later, but yeah, he doesn't really go in depth about what these do, but his older videos, if you go through, he explains a ton of different things. Like all these registry tweaks that he applied have been picked out, and you can actually just go back in his videos and you can see what these registry tweaks do specifically. I've gone through all of these. They're great registry tweaks. Again, Windows doesn't need a ton of different registry tweaks. There's only some things that it needs. But yeah, his registry file is very good. I highly recommend going through and applying his A to Z guide. I can't stress it enough. I highly recommend going and doing this guide if you want a clean and just a great running build of Windows. That's going to cover it for this. All right, if you don't want to wipe your Windows for some reason and you do not want to, and you just want to keep your computer the way it is, again, I highly recommend you do it. Just back up your shit to a USB drive or to an external hard drive, wipe Windows, and follow the guide. But if for some reason you do not want to do that, here are some things that I'm going to go through. So add or remove programs. So if you go to add or remove programs, you can go and just uninstall things you don't need. That's the first thing. Startup apps, if you type in startup apps here, uncheck startup apps you don't need. They're just going to slow down your computer. msconfig, if you type in msconfig here, you're going to see system configuration. It's going to pop up here. Go to services, hide all Microsoft services, and uncheck things that you do not need on startup. Next is disable hardware acceleration. This goes for both, like for this guide as well. You should disable hardware acceleration for Discord. You go to settings in Discord and go to appearance, scroll down and hardware acceleration, turn this off. Same thing goes for Chrome. Just go to settings in Chrome, type in acceleration, turn both of these off. Run Valorant admin. For Valorant, you should run Valorant in administrator mode. So I'm just going to close Discord. You right click on Valorant, go to properties, go to compatibility, and check run as administrator. Change settings for all users, run as administrator. Do that for the desktop app. If you go to C, Riot Games, Valorant, Live, same thing here. Do the exact same thing. Compatibility, run as administrator, change settings, run as administrator. Sorry, shooter game, binaries Win64. Do it for Valorant Win64 shipping. And also make sure that in C, Riot Games, under Riot Client, make sure that you're running this as administrator as well. And then restart your computer after you do that. If you boot up Valorant and you get an error, which you shouldn't if you make sure that this is also in administrator, then you can just go and uncheck run as administrator. But if you do get an error, restart your computer and then see if it works, and you shouldn't get an error. Next, Power Plan Ultimate. So I think I go over that here. Yes. So I'm going to link this in the description. If you copy this line here, go to CMD, make sure you run as administrator, paste this in and hit enter. It's going to add the ultimate performance power scheme. So if I go to power options, edit power plan, power options here, you'll see that I added it in twice because I hit enter, but you'll see ultimate performance. If it's not there, you just have to click show additional plans. Click on ultimate performance. If you follow like the Freethy guide, it's going to do bitsum highest performance. If you download Process Lasso, which you can, you'll get bitsum highest performance. You can actually use that as well, but if you don't want Lasso, you don't want like another program on your computer, let's say, you can just run ultimate performance. Next, what is the next thing on the list? We got background apps. So if you type in background apps, you want to turn all background apps off. You just want to make sure that none of this is running in the background. Next is game mode. If you type in game mode, you'll see game mode settings. Turn game mode on. Go to captures, make sure there's nothing on here. Xbox game bar mode, turn this off. Turn anything off. Xbox networking, that's fine. Turn anything off, turn everything off here. And then if you click game mode and hit graphics settings here, you'll see, you might not see variable refresh. It depends on the Windows build you're on. On the newest one, if you have a Gsync monitor, you'll see this. Just keep this off. If you're on like a newer build of Windows, you might see this. Hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. Turn this on if you do not use OBS. If you do use OBS, you want to turn this off just because there's like issues with OBS and this for some reason. There's articles about it. Turn this off. And yeah, that's pretty much it for game mode. Update internet drivers. I'm going to link something. It's actually from, I'm not claiming this is mine because it is Freethy's. It's from his video in his folder. There's a folder called Internet Drivers. I just put it in my own Google Drive. Just gonna empty this. And what you'll do is you'll download it and you'll get a folder called Internet Drivers. You want to go to your Internet driver. So I'm just gonna open this here, and we're gonna go Device Manager, and you're gonna go to Network Adapters. You're gonna find your network adapter. Right-click, Update Driver. Browse My Computer for Drivers. Browse. And you're going to navigate to that folder that is going to be in the Google Drive that you downloaded and make sure you extract it if you have to extract it. And hit OK and hit next. What it's going to do is it's going to update your internet drivers to the latest drivers. If you want to see what internet driver you're on, just right click Properties, go to Driver. You want to make sure you're on a newer internet driver. Some of them are you might be on a 2015 driver. You want to make sure that you're on the latest driver. And once you do that, right-click Properties. Once you're updated, go to Power Management and uncheck these two. Uncheck the bottom one first, then the top one. You don't want this device to turn off to save power. Hit OK. Right-click Properties, Advanced. You want to disable any power-saving features under the Advanced. So energy efficient Ethernet. You might have something called green Ethernet or Gigabyte Light. You want to disable both of those. So disable Gigabyte Light, disable Green Ethernet. And then reduce speed on power down, disabled. You literally to actually disable something, you go to the value and change it. So reduce speed on power down. Reduce speed on power down, disabled. And don't touch anything else in here. There's lots of articles on different things and all these different things you can do. On the latest drivers for networking options, don't touch anything. Let it do it itself. Don't go unchecking all this crap. Yeah, so just make sure you disable the power saving features. And there's one more thing. Go to not device manager. I'm going to go to network settings. What am I doing here? I'm just going to right click on my network here. Go to open network and internet settings. I'm going to go to, this is the way I do it. I don't know why it works for me, but I'm just going to show it again. Open network settings. I click on properties and then go back again. And I click on change adapter options and this pops up here. I don't know why I do it that way. Obviously, you can just navigate to this. Right click, properties, and in here, you can disable, if you have IPv6, if you just go to Google and type in IPv6 checker and click this. I'm not going to do it just because I'm not going to do it just because it's going to show my IP. You can see if you have IPv6. If it shows an X beside IPv6, uncheck this. If you do have IPv6 enabled, like if your internet allows IPv6, leave it checked off. That pretty much covers. Oh no, there's still some more things in here. Sorry. ISLC. So I'm gonna give a link to this here. What you want to do is you want to download it. Should not have closed it. But if you scroll down on that website, download the ISLC and you're gonna extract it and open it. You're gonna get something like this. If it doesn't open right away, if you open it and nothing happens, go down and you'll see, you might have an arrow, click the arrow, and you'll see like a little thing with a graph on it, and it says Intelligent Standby List Cleaner. Double click on it, and you'll see something like this. It's not gonna look the exact same as this. Like these will be unchecked. Hit stop, and under here where it says free memory is lower than, if you have 16 gigs of RAM, change this to 8,192. If you have 32 gigs of RAM, 1,192 times 2, you're going to type in 16,384 into this box if you have 32 gigs of RAM. Check both of these. Put your wanted timer resolution to 0.5. Check enable custom timer resolution. Hit start and minimize this. Don't close this. If you close this, it will close the program. Minimize it. It will boot up every single time you boot up Windows, and what it's going to do is it's going to clear your standby list automatically. Pretty much what I just did, I just clicked it, but if once these rules are met, it will clear your standby list. This shows you the number of times it was cleared. What that is if you go to Task Manager, Performance, and go to Memory, you might have a ton of cached memory. What that does is it automatically will clear this cache memory. You don't want a lot of cache memory built up. What this does is clears that cache memory. Then we have Device Manager, disable HDAC. So under Device Manager, and I skipped over sounds. I'll go over sounds after this. If you go to View Devices by Connection, you might see something like this. You want to just open these up until you see a bunch of different things here, and you just want to open the arrows for all the PCI bridges until you can find a PCI to PCI bridge that has your GPU on it, if you have an NVIDIA GPU. And you want to disable this high definition audio controller here. So right click, disable this. And forgot about sounds. So if you go to your sounds, if I just type in sounds, change system sounds, go to playback, you want to disable anything that you have in here except for your main sound device. So I have a mix amp for my my headphones. I use the Astro mix amp. I want to disable all the monitor playback sounds if I have any here. Disable anything except for, and to disable it, you just right click, disable, just like that. And you just want your only sound, like only the sound that you're using to be enabled. Right click, properties, enhancements, disable all enhancements. Hit OK. Recording, same thing, disable everything you don't need, and just keep enabled what your actual recording device is. If you use two different ones, make sure they're both enabled, and make sure you set your default to what your default is. And that pretty much covers, if you don't want to wipe Windows, that's pretty much the best things you can do. You don't need to go through and do a whole bunch of different other tweaks. I'm going to go over some other tweaks that people talk about, and I'm just going to expand on them pretty much. That's probably in 13, 14, which I'll probably combine together. Yeah, so that's pretty much covering Windows optimization and Windows optimization tweaks if you don't want to wipe your computer. All right, next is which is the best NVIDIA driver? So if you followed the Freethy guide, then he's gonna put you on 457.3. Honestly, 457.51 is the best driver for Valorant. 457.3 and 457.51 are pretty much the same, but 457.51 actually gets more FPS in Valorant. I've tested like a ton of different NVIDIA drivers. 457.51 is the best for Valorant. And let's say you didn't follow this guide and you are just doing the basic, like you just want to wipe your computer and all that stuff. Sorry, you don't want to wipe your computer. What you want to do is, you don't have to do this again, but if you didn't follow this, you're going to have to download a program called DDU, which is, display driver uninstaller here. So you go and look for this program. You can just type in DDU on Google and download it. And you should open your computer in safe mode when doing this. Press start, press power, hold shift and click restart. You can go through the steps on putting your computer in safe mode. I think Freethy in the actual video, in his guide, he shows how to also put the computer in safe mode as well. I think in no, it's not in DXDIG. It's in msconfig. You can do it. I think in diagnostic startup. Oh, here, boot. You can hear boot, safe mode, and minimal. Yeah. If you hit that, hit OK, restart your computer, it's going to boot in safe mode. But make sure that when you're done in safe mode, that you type in msconfig again and go to boot and uncheck safe mode to get back into normal mode. Once you download DDU, you want to open DDU in safe mode. The best way of cleaning out fully cleaning the NVIDIA drivers. Select device type, GPU, NVIDIA, and before you click clean and restart, hit options and check this box here, prevent downloads of drivers from Windows Update when Windows search for a driver for a device. What this will do is when you restart your computer, Windows will automatically want to install an NVIDIA, like the latest NVIDIA driver, and it'll just start doing it right away. That stops Windows from doing it. So when you're in safe mode, hit clean and restart here. And what it'll do is it will delete the whole NVIDIA driver and restart your computer from safe mode. Make sure you take it out of safe mode when you're in safe mode, and your Windows will boot up normally, and then you'll boot up to a computer that it's going to be in like 60 hertz and it's just going to look weird. From there, you're going to want to go to this. You're going to want to look for NVIDIA drivers. If you just type in NVIDIA drivers download, hit download drivers, go to beta and old drivers here. Find your graphics card. So GeForce, I have a 30 series, 3090. Windows driver type, I'm going to go to DCH. And here I'm going to hit recommended and certified. I'm going to hit search. I'm going to find 457.51. Click here, click download. Once it's downloaded, you can download something called NVCleanstall. And here, NVCleanstall. When you download NVCleanstall, it's going to look like this. You're going to hit use driver files on disk. You're going to click browse, and you're going to navigate to the file that you need. And once you find the file that you downloaded, you're going to navigate to the file you downloaded, double click, hit next. Display driver, you can click physics as well. You don't have to use physics if you don't want, but you can click this. I recommend just using these two. Hit next. It's going to unpack it. Again, what this is going to do, this is going to put you on an older driver. It's going to delete GeForce Experience. Like checking just those two, you won't have GeForce Experience anymore. So if you want GeForce Experience, don't do this. You can check GeForce Experience. You can check all those things off if you want, and you'll just go back to 457 point. You'll go to this driver with GeForce Experience and all those things. I highly recommend just installing a debloated NVIDIA driver, which is what this is now. Click disable installer telemetry and advertising. Disable that. Unintended express. leave this checked, perform a clean install, and click this as well. You don't need to do these, just leave it the way it is, hit next, and let it install. This will install the latest, sorry, not the latest, this will install 457.51, and then you'll be on the best NVIDIA driver. I can tell you that right now, it is the best, and you're gonna have to go and redo your NVIDIA control panel settings after you do that as well. So all your NVIDIA control panel settings will be different, so go and reapply whatever you need to reapply in here. Yeah, that covers pretty much which NVIDIA driver you should use for the highest FPS. And even if you're running, let's say you're running Gsync and you're capped, this is still the best NVIDIA driver by far. I've had so many problems with the other ones. There's just like little reflex rendering issues and numbers just. I had a problem with, like, I addressed this a while ago with the numbers just fluctuating to crazy, like, different numbers for the rendering. And it's because the NVIDIA drivers are just like the newest ones are just awful, and they haven't fixed them for Valorant. So 457.51 for Valorant, best NVIDIA driver. That covers that. All right, the next thing I'm going to cover is these two here. I'm going to combine them. I'm actually going to start with 14. So a lot of YouTubers just steal info from other YouTubers that have no idea what they're doing. Windows is built by experts, not 14-year-olds. Very true statement. Windows is built by experts, tons of like just programming geniuses. Let's just go with the word genius. It's built by many programmers, has gone through tons of testing. So a lot of these like registry tweaks and a lot of just like tweaks that people do to Windows and they just destroy Windows pretty much. It's just a bunch of kids and they have no idea what they're talking about. They don't have any proof for anything they're doing. And a big thing is, let's say someone says, oh yeah, well, here's an article showing that this actually reduces like input lag or it helps with a better system. If you go to these articles, you'll see that they're dated from like 2002 or like the 90s. Some people literally will link an article and it's so far outdated and it has nothing to do with the current builds of Windows. Maybe if you're on like a crazy old build of Windows, yeah, that might work for you. But on the latest builds of Windows, half of these tweaks don't do anything and you do not need to apply them. And you shouldn't apply them. They're just going to destroy your system. And a lot of things, again, a lot of YouTubers steal info from other YouTubers. I'm not really stealing info. I shouldn't say like for me, like this is pretty much, I'm kind of like calling myself out in a way, but I'm referencing that info. I'm not saying, I'm not going and showing you this guide and telling you, like showing it as my own. No, Freethy, he built the guide. I'm not stealing his info. 100%, that's all his info. He took a lot of time into it. 100% at the end, I have shout outs to everyone because you should go and follow these people, subscribe to them. They have great information and they have tons of proof of what they're doing. And again, same with my, like all my stuff that I'm showing here, there's proof behind everything, latency numbers, there's just, everything is proven for what I'm showing here. I don't just say, hey, go do this. And that's it. No, I am showing as much proof as possible. I'm showing latency numbers and showing why these are the best settings. And again, if I have something, I'm linking it back to a reliable source, like NVIDIA per se, like the Gsync thing. Literally, NVIDIA says themselves in their latency article, NVIDIA Gsync plus Reflex plus, Gsync plus Vsync plus Reflex. You can run it and you're not going to hit Vsync range. That, for example, I'm not just making that up. NVIDIA said it themselves, and you can literally check the latency numbers yourselves. Do your own testing. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt because everybody's systems are different. They're not the same. Everybody has different hardware. Everybody has different computers. So not just because one thing works for someone doesn't mean it's going to work for you. That's a big thing, and just don't blindly go applying registry tweaks. Don't go and find stuff on YouTube and you'll see a registry, like they'll say, oh, download my pack or whatever. You download it, you apply it, and ta-da, your game feels amazing. No, it doesn't work like that. A lot of these things are actually, they'll lead to more system latency or ruin your system in the end. Don't blindly go applying registry tweaks without knowing what they do, and make sure that if they do reference something, that the article is up to date, or at least there's some kind of proof that it works on the current build or on the build of Windows that you are on. So I'm just going to go through, let's say, so a big guide that was passed to the community was the stronglegs FPS optimization. I actually used this when I had, like, just back in the day, I went and found this video and I applied it. This was on an older build of Windows, and I didn't really know much back then, and now I've gained a lot of knowledge, and I've done so much research. I've spent hours and hours and just like so much time into finding all these different things out, and I can't even tell you the number of times I've reinstalled Windows just to figure out what all the bullshit is, pretty much. So let's go to the stronglegs FPS optimization guide. I got in a huge debate on Twitter with someone. They're like, "Oh yeah, well this helps my system, blah 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 blah." And this was recently, and I told them like on the latest build of Windows, and I explained a bunch of different things of why it doesn't really help. So I'm gonna go through that right now. So he says download ISLC and go and disable Core 0. Okay, first of all, disabling Core 0 doesn't do anything if you have high core count. Like on high core counts, what he's saying is pretty much that Windows offloads processes on, like most of the Windows processes run on Core 0, so you don't want your game running on Core 0. No, Windows, when I talked about before about the process scheduling of Windows and putting your hex key on 26, let Windows figure out where Windows processes need to be done. It doesn't all dump on Core 0. Windows figures that out itself. Don't disable Core 0. And another thing is, he said disable Core 0 and just like that's it. If you're running hyperthreading, you need to disable the core and the thread. You can't just disable, if you're running, like because I don't have hyperthreading on, if you just disable Core 0, you're going to leave the thread hanging. You need to, if you, for some reason, let's say it does work better for you, or like you're specifically setting cores for Valorant, like you want to just dedicate 6 cores to Valorant, you should disable the core and the thread if you have hyperthreading on. Don't just disable the core and leave the thread hanging. That's one big thing, and that's just, like right away when he said disable Core 0 and that's it, that's just a big red flag because you're not actually disabling the thread as well. Next, what else did he talk about? He talked about disabling full screen optimizations. So disabling full screen optimizations on older builds of Windows, or if you're running Windows Server from Freethy, yes, disable full screen optimizations. But this is his table on the latency testing he did. Here's the Valorant. How to read this table, I'm just going to show quickly how to read this table. This is default with the input lag, like the input delay was, basic tweaks, and it literally shows like he applies these tweaks. You highlight it if you just scroll over it, and this is what the input delay is now. And then next he goes through and tries, and he does a bunch of different tweaks and shows how the input lag actually increases or decreases. Like idle disabling like the power option in Windows, which was recommended by Calypto, I think it was, and even Melody, I think too. It actually leads to more input lag. So don't do that. And then what he does, he'll say, okay, I reverted this, and then I did the next thing. And he shows how it leads to, like, so I reverted it, and then I tried something else. It led to lower latency. I'm going to keep it on. So he goes through one by one by one by one and goes through a bunch of different things. And if we go to here, games in high priority. People say use lasso, put your game in high priority. So we have to go to the latest one here, which is for hyperthreading off. Disrupt base here. Oh, this is just proving that these are disabled and these are placebo. And then this is his old A to Z strip base, not his new one, which actually caused more latency in the end. So we go to games in high priority here. They actually lead to more latency here. from here to here, there's actually more latency if you put your games in high priority. Don't put your games in high priority. Leave them in normal. Let Windows do its thing. Don't touch priorities. Don't put your I/O priority. Don't even mess with lasso unless you're disabling hyperthreading specifically for games. That's it. And the Bitsum high performance, obviously, that power plan's amazing, or ultimate performance, but again, you can run Bitsum highest performance. That's what I'm running. Don't put your games in high priority. This chart also applies. He also does it for a bunch of different games if you want to look, see what tweaks actually help and don't help. And some of them, like maybe something does help, but it's like barely, the latency is barely anything at all in change. There's no need to, if there's like a 0.05 millisecond like input delay change, don't do it. There's no need. If it's a drastic change, 1 millisecond, like that's pretty much drastic, because like if you see these numbers, if you start it from 13.92 to this is pretty big, but like most of these are sitting around 10, 11 milliseconds. You don't really need to apply any of these. Main thing is, it comes down to the main thing is hardware. Hardware is always going to get you lower latency. Yeah. That's going over the strongly. Oh yeah, and another thing was what did he apply? He applied a Windows scheduler to clear the RAM cache. Just use ISLC. Program's amazing, and this will automatically clear your RAM cache in the background. So just don't do anything in that guide pretty much. You don't need to do any of it. Download ISLC, call it a day. Yeah, disabling full screen optimizations. It actually shows, here it is here. So FSO means full screen optimizations, and this means full screen exclusive. So this means if you're actually going to run the game in exclusive full screen compared to not exclusive full screen, the input lag is next to nothing, like on difference wise. There's just no need to do it. And it can actually lead to more problems disabling full screen optimizations. So don't disable full screen optimizations on this is all for the latest Windows build. If you're on an older Windows build, disable full screen optimizations. Server, disable full screen optimizations. On 20H2, do not disable full screen optimizations. Another thing was like high precision event timer, which is HPET. He went over and he said device manager, disable HPET here. Don't need to do that. You just need to go and remove some BC edits. Apply these three here. Delete value, disable dynamic tick, delete value, use platform tick, and set NX opt-in. Copy these, run these into your CMD. Again, if you follow the guide, you don't need to do it like the Freethy guide, but let's say you're running like just the regular Windows, and you're on the latest build, you do not need to disable HPET. You can just delete value. Just use this command here in command prompt and make sure you're an administrator. Yeah, going back, sorry. So AtomX and Melody, these are just YouTubers that people follow and blindly apply their tweaks. I've been in their Discords and I've just totally roasted them and got kicked out. Just like, oh yeah, well, like, where's the proof? Like, do you have graphs? Do you have numbers? Do you have anything? And like the funniest reply I heard was actually from Melody, and she goes, I don't need expensive equipment to tell that my tweaks work. What? What do you, like, you have no proof at all? She goes, I can feel that my tweaks work, or like people can feel that what I do, it works. No, you're just falling into the placebo effect. They don't work. It's all fucking snake oil. Like, all this stuff is just, don't do it. It's going to ruin your system. Again, only apply things that have proof and work with hard data. You can get a 360 Hz monitor and you can use the tool built in. You can test input delay. Some of it actually just pulls from the database, but if you get like one of the actual mice that are like, and you hardwire it, let's say the G Pro Superlight, and you hardwire it, you can do the testing. You can see what causes input lag and what doesn't. And if you apply a bunch of registry tweaks and go and see what your on-screen click is, it might be a lot higher because half these registry tweaks don't do anything. So that's my rant pretty much about just blindly applying tweaks. Yeah, on to the next thing. All right, the next thing I'm going to cover is DPI and why you should switch to 1600 DPI or higher. So Battle Nonsense actually has a video here. Mouse movement to photon delay. I'm just going to take this graph here. You should watch this whole video. It's a great video. It's called Razer Viper AK Delay Analysis. This is for the Razer Viper AK, but we can take this into factor with mainly all mice because of the polling rates and the DPI. So the Razer Viper AK at 400 DPI at 125 Hz polling rate has a system end-to-end latency of 26.49 milliseconds. And if you look at the ranges, top and bottom range, it's very, it can go to 11.66 and to 51.09. And this is just the average. It can vary between these two. It's all over the place pretty much at 125 Hertz at 400 DPI. If you compare it to 125 Hertz at 1600 DPI, it's still awful, but you actually get a little bit less system end-to-end latency. But no one's really using 125 Hertz, I hope not. So let's move to the 1000 Hertz polling rate, which is probably 99% of you. If you're on 400 DPI, you get 10.66 milliseconds of system end-to-end latency. If you switch to 1600 DPI, you actually get lower system end-to-end latency. And because Valorant has an in-game sensitivity, all you have to do is take your DPI, like take your current, let's say you're running on 400 DPI, just take your in-game sense and divide it by 4. And when you switch to 1600 DPI, it's the same. And let's say I'm on 800 DPI, all I have to do is divide it by 2. And when I'm on 1600 DPI, that's my sense now. It's going to be the exact same. And I'm going to get lower system end-to-end latency. This is just for the Razer Viper AK, but again, we can pretty much apply, like we can't apply it to all the current mice out there, but we can take these stats into effect and say an actual polling, the DPI on a higher DPI can lead to lower system end-to-end latency. Again, this is with his settings too, like with his computer, like all these. If you're running a very low-end system and you put on 1600 DPI, it might cause mouse polling issues, and then just go back to 400 DPI. But if you're running a decent system, or even like a half good system, you should be able to run 1600 DPI no problem. And I highly recommend updating to 1600 DPI. And the Razer 8K, for example, this is just ridiculous. This stat is insane. Running a 400 DPI on the Razer 8K compared to 1600 DPI, that's almost 6 milliseconds of system end-to-end latency going to 1600 DPI. That's ridiculous. That's a stupid amount. And yeah, it's crazy to see like how far mice are evolving, and like now we're on 8K polling rates. Absolutely insane. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about for mouse polling rates and why you should switch to 1600 DPI or higher. Next, we're going to talk about untangling your network. So go to dslreports.com, run and go to speed test, run test. Click on what internet you have. If you have gigabit fiber, if you have cable, DSL. If you don't know what you have, if you have a cable, like a coax cable running to your router, it looks like a metal, like round piece, then click cable. If you have like a phone jack cable running to your router, you're running DSL most likely. And fiber, you'll know if you have fiber. It's just, there'll be a fiber line pretty much, and it'll say like, don't look, there'll be like labels saying, don't look at this laser, blah, blah, blah. If you have like 1,000 down, 1,000 up symmetrical speeds, if you have symmetrical speeds like down, up, you have fiber. So you'll click on the one you want and it'll do a test. Here's the test that recently was done for mine. 619 down, 944 up. I'm supposed to be getting 1,000 down, 1,000 up, but due to like throttling and just like my network provider, this is the average speed down and this is the average speed up that they're giving me. And then it's going to give you a rating of speed, and there's another thing, and then also there's going to be something called buffer bloat. If your buffer bloat isn't above, I'd say a B+, you need to untangle your network. And that goes on to, like, untangling your network is about getting a good router and making sure that you are feeding your internet line properly to that router. And you can watch this video right here, Battle Nonsense. Do it yourself gaming router, untangle your network. There's also one right here, gamer setup. This router can save your marriage. You can go through and follow these. It requires buying equipment and stuff and just doing some things that you might not want to do. Honestly, what I found the best thing to do for me, because I have fiber, I my modem that came with my router is terrible. So this here, which is a a gigabit Ethernet media converter, what it does is it passes the fiber line through, and then so I plug my fiber line into here, and then out from here I plug an Ethernet cable into my router. Because my router that came with the modem that came from my ISP, my internet service provider, it doesn't allow to turn off like the residential mode that's like comes with it. I can turn off the Wi-Fi and stuff, but the pass through isn't good. If you have like a disable residential mode, or you can pass through properly using your modem, you can search your modem and say how to, like, if you search up your modem on Google and just say how to set up router with this modem, there might be a pass through option. For Bell, I don't know if any of you have Bell fiber. Their modem's awful and doesn't allow pass through. So this is the best option for me, is to buy one of these. And then I highly recommend, I actually have one of these coming soon, is a NetDuma router. You can get other routers, doesn't matter, you don't have to use this. The NetDuma router, amazing router. Like, unbelievably well designed, very minimal. And this NetDuma R2 just came out, like what, maybe 1-2 weeks ago. Amazing router, and it allows for QoS, which is, what is QoS? Quality of service. What it does is it takes that you can actually prioritize certain devices within your network to get more like internet traffic. It's prioritized through your network. So if you want to untangle your network, QoS is the best thing to do. QoS will put you at an A or A+, because it's going to, if you set it up properly and enable your computer to high priority, it's going to prioritize packets to your computer. It's going to give you way better. It's going to give you better ping. It's going to make your network run smoother. QoS is great if you have a router that has good QoS. If you have a cheap router that has QoS, it might not be that good, because some QoS routers are terrible. So again, you need to find a good QoS router. NetDuma has one. Asus has some really good ones. The Nighthawk's a pretty good one. Or you can follow the Battle Nonsense video, and it's actually pretty cheap to do one through like I forget what company it is. You can literally you're building your own router. But yeah, QoS will help you untangle your network. You'll get a better interconnection. The game's gonna feel better. Next, Ethernet over Wi-Fi. 100% get an Ethernet cable. Cat 8 is the latest. They're the same like, you might as well not get a Cat 6 or Cat 5. Just go, they're literally so cheap nowadays. Go and buy a Cat 8 cable. And these are very high speed cables, great cables, and use a Cat 8 cable. Highly recommend buying one of these. Also, if you're on Wi-Fi and you can't like feed an Ethernet cable to your router, or your parents are like, they won't let you like feed an Ethernet cable to your router for some odd reason, you're stuck on Wi-Fi, I recommend buying an Ethernet power line adapter. What this does here, you can buy any one. Just make sure that it supports your speeds. If you have fiber like gigabit Ethernet, don't get like a 600 megabit one. Make sure you're getting a gigabit one if you have gigabit Ethernet per se. What this does is it uses the power within the walls to feed Ethernet through. So you'd plug one of these where your computer is. You plug the other one where your router is. Then you plug the Ethernet cable into your router, Ethernet cable into your computer, and now you're on wired internet using the power lines in your house. Great alternative, and it's better than Wi-Fi. So If you can't hardwire your computer, buy a set of these. This is Amazon.ca. It's probably cheaper in the US if you're in the US. Yeah, that's going to cover pretty much the networking side of this like part. All right. All right, next is my settings. So if you type in DX, this is just going to pop up with the DirectX diagnostic tool. It's just going to tell you like some things about your computer. So obviously I'm running Freethy's optimization guide. I'm running a 3090 with the Dark Hero motherboard. I have a RAM cooler over my RAM because my RAM runs at 1.5 volts, which is pretty hot. So I have a cooler specifically over top of my RAM to cool my RAM, and especially because I have my timings pretty tight, I want to make sure that that RAM's cool. If I just ran my RAM in XMP mode, I probably wouldn't need a RAM cooler, even though it's probably recommended at 1.5 volts. But because I have my RAM timings pretty tight, I have a RAM cooler over top. What else? Dark Hero motherboard. I have very low cast latency RAM. I have, what is it? There's the Trident Z Neo CL14 at 3800 megahertz. You want to get, if you're buying RAM, you buy a high-end computer, make sure you get good RAM, low cast latency RAM. If you just want to, you can literally just type in low cast latency, low cast latency RAM. I highly recommend Trident Z Neo CL14 RAM. CL14 is going to be probably the lowest you can get at like a decently high megahertz RAM. Yeah, the highest you can get this is at 3800. Yeah, what else do I have? Just like I have a Lian Li cooler, like liquid cooler, Lian Li case. I have 6 fans. I have the Alienware monitor, and like the Alienware 360 Hz monitor. Currently, I'm using the G Pro wireless. I have a Razer 8K. I just don't like the shape, to be honest. I really love the Razer Viper Mini, so I really hope they make the Viper Mini in an 8K format. We'll see, hopefully. I run the Artisan Ninja FX0 mousepad with a Shroud, I don't even know, a Logitech full desk mousepad underneath it. I just like to rest my left wrist where my keyboard is on top of something. I don't like it on the wooden desk. And then I put my other mousepad on top of that. I use the Logitech, no, not Logitech. I use the SteelSeries Apex Pro with actuation keys. And I use rubber keycaps for my like WASD and all those things. Yeah, that's pretty much it for setting rise. I'm on the Freethy build of 20H2 Windows. NVIDIA settings I pretty much went over. I literally only play Valorant and record videos, so I don't really, there's nothing really else that's special about my system. For overclock, I'm running a manual overclock of 4.65 gigahertz. Yeah, which is right here. And I have SMT disabled, all my C states disabled, all that kind of stuff that I went over in the BIOS video. Nothing really special, pretty much just running everything that I recommend you guys to run. Yeah, that's it for my setup and my hardware. On to the next thing. All right, the next thing is going to be onto supplements and drink lots of water. These things here. So first I'm going to talk supplements. So for supplements, I take this here, which is AOR Super Focus 60 capsules. And so before I go over this, pretty much there's so many expensive like drinks and like there's so many different like all these different things that you can buy geared towards gamers and all this kind of stuff. And if you take, all you really have to do is take the main ingredients of those and grab them in pill format, and it's going to be so much cheaper. Like so much cheaper. And the reason I got this is because I bought a bunch of bottles because they were on sale. But before I actually bought this, I was taking a breakdown of these things here. I was just taking caffeine. I was taking caffeine, L-theanine, Redolia rosea, and choline. Those are the 4 things I was taking. And I was taking them in a little higher doses than this, but this is honestly fine for me. I just increase the dose to what I need to. If you take caffeine or drink coffee, I highly recommend looking up why why caffeine and L-theanine paired together it's a great thing. There's articles on why caffeine and L-theanine go hand in hand and why they're great together. I don't recommend anybody just go and take caffeine. Again, caffeine can cause jitters. It's literally a drug. It's like cocaine. And I highly recommend you look up or do your own research on these things, but this is personally what I take. I'm not telling you to take it. This is what I take. This supplement here, and again, if you don't have access to this or you want to buy a breakdown, I would say buying caffeine, theanine, Redolia rosea, ginseng extract. You could, yeah, maybe, but mainly choline. These 4 things, very good together. Again, if you don't want all 4, caffeine's probably your number 1 go-to. And I'm not going to explain why. And then theanine together, those 2. Yeah, that's pretty much it for supplement wise. This is, yeah, what I take. And then let's go to the next thing, drink lots of water. You need to stay hydrated. You need to drink tons of water, especially when gaming. I can't stress that enough. I know everybody says it, but drink lots of water. Have a jug of water beside you and just be fucking downing that water. Drink as much water as you can. Next thing is blue light glasses. I have blue light glasses. I wear them. They're great if monitors put a lot of stress on your eyes and if you spend just a lot of time in front of your monitor. Wear blue light glasses. They're cheap and they're a great thing to wear if you don't want to put a lot of strain on your eyes and you spend a lot of time in front of a monitor. Last thing is take a walk. That's every couple of games, you should just get off your computer and just take a walk. Go outside and get some fresh air. They just take literally walk to the mailbox and back. Go outside and just sit outside for a bit. Get some oxygen flowing into your brain, just your eyes. Go outside and breathe in some fresh air. I know it sounds dumb to some of you, but it's a great thing to do, and you should 100% do it. Just breathe in some fresh air, and it can even help. I wore contacts for the longest time, and now I got laser eye surgery, and it's great. But when I was wearing contacts, even now, it's just a lot of strain on your eyes from just staring at a computer constantly. Go outside and let some fresh air just flow into your eyes and just into your brain pretty much. It's relaxing and it's a very good thing to do. I know I sound ridiculous to some people, but some people understand. And once you do it, or let's say even a month, you'll understand why. It's a great thing to do and everybody should be doing it. Don't sit there and play a straight 8 hours without getting up. If you need to go to the washroom, go to the washroom. But taking a break for even 2 minutes, for 5 minutes, a great thing to do, and I highly recommend doing it. The last thing I'm going to talk about is you are limiting yourself. So at the end of the day, no matter what, if you want to improve, you're the one that needs to improve. You need to take the time to improve. Applying all these, doing all these things that I'm talking about here is just to help make the game more enjoyable and maybe get the tiniest bit less input lag. It's again, you yourself are what is limiting you from becoming a better player. You want to get better? Play the game. Don't spend hours in aim trainers. Don't for me personally, I aim train. Maybe back in the day when I was trying to learn FPS, I spent a little more time, maybe 20 minutes. Now I literally hop on. I have a routine that I do in an aim trainer, in aim labs actually. I'll share that later in another video. I hop on. It's 8 minutes, and then I go and I sit and I hop in range. And in practice range, I have another warm up that I do. That takes 20 minutes. So my warm up together is 30 minutes, but 20 minutes is in game. And then I play. And that's what I highly recommend. If you want to get better at the game, play the game. Don't spend a lot of time in aim trainers. You need to build game sense. There's so many different aspects of the game besides aiming. And you need to learn these things, you need to play the game. It's that simple. Go on, play the game, and that's how you will get better. And you remember, again, you're limiting yourself from the game. There's no silver bullet in Windows that's going to make you an insane player. There's no like tweak in Windows, no button that's going to be like, you're a god aimer now. No, it doesn't work like that. You need to play the game, and you are the one that needs to get better to improve. It might be the hard truth for some people, but that's what it is. I don't care if you don't like hearing it. Simple fact. All right, and I'll just combine this here with the shout outs. So shout out to NVIDIA, to their latency article, to Battle Nonsense. Go subscribe to his channel. Go subscribe to him, and to RTINGS. Shout out to all these people, and yeah, that's pretty much it for my guide. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, anything, you want to roast me, I don't care. Go and leave it in the comments. Follow me on Twitter, @ShackCS. Subscribe. I trying to post more. Really hard with work. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed.